and welcome to the Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue Macdonald, and you're very welcome this evening. This is the third episode of the seventh series. I always have to sort of state that because it seems amazing we're this far. It only seems a few weeks ago that we started doing these hours, and we've just carried on regardless. And as I said, my name's Sue Macdonald. I'm the curator for this hour and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my delight this evening to be chairing the session. And I've got two leading lights with me, Michelle Steptoe from London South Bank Uni and Chelone from St George's. I hope I pronounced your names correctly. Welcome to both of you. Now, of course, we have to put our guests on the spot first thing and ask them for their little moment of the week to share with us. And I'm going to start with Michelle, firstly, to ask her moment of the week.
Okay, my moment of the week is actually today. It's my mother's birthday today, and I took her out to lunch. And 23 years ago today, I gave her a very nice birthday present, which was my daughter. So it's also my daughter's birthday today. So that's my moment of the week, although she's not very happy because I'm here, but she'll forgive me.
It's only for a little while, Michelle, and
yes.
we're very grateful to you. And how lovely. That is fantastic. That's a double moment of the week, I think. How about Chelone?
Well, I have a strange horticultural sort of environmental moment of the week that I was thinking of just now. And I saw bumblebees in my garden, and I don't know if many people see bumblebees around. And it was quite exciting on the weekend because I had previously seen dead bumblebees in my garden last year. And I was really upset because I was reading about pesticides that were approved by the government, which were dangerous for bees. So I was really excited, and probably unnecessarily excited.
It's lovely. It's a real thing of spring to see them around, isn't it? All the bees coming out with the flowers. That's lovely. Thank you. That's a nice, positive and springy feel to this evening. So I'm just going to do my usual little welcome, and just to remind people who are with us this evening where the Maternity and Midwifery Hour came from. We started right at the beginning of the first lockdown in the UK at the COVID-19 point, and it was really a point at which we could share, we could meet as midwives, as student midwives, as people who wanted to become midwives, of anyone who in maternity care, to join us and just have that connection, have some up-to-date information, and just be able to share and be together, even for that 1 hour a week. And we're supported by Netflix, and they look after all the kind of materials that get recorded. Everything's recorded. And it's all free to access, and you're very free to share anything that you watch. And so for any of you who are doing anything for revalidation, that's on my mind because that's my turn next year. Anyone who's doing an essay or an assignment, there's this huge amount of information available, all for free, all very accessible. And again, you can share. And so if you're watching this tonight and you think, oh, my colleagues would be really interested in this, you could always have a little coffee time or a lunchtime session, share the session with them, and then have a discussion about it. I think tonight's session is going to be very good for that. So do share. I just want to say a big thank you, and especially I think to midwives. And I've got this on my mind because last week, of course, was the International Day of the Midwife, a wonderful day. And I know there's huge things going on all over the country, very exciting, very positive. And people might be feeling a bit down. I know people are feeling very tired because of the after effects of COVID. It's gone on a long time and people are working their socks off. And I know that. And that goes to our midwives and our student midwives and our maternity care support workers. Everyone in the service is working really hard, covering sickness, but also just keeping it going and keeping those services, quality services, going for mothers, babies and their families. So big thank you and big respect to you all as well. Also, of course, our NHS colleagues, because wherever you are in the NHS, you are working really hard and you are valued, and you must remember that. I think one of the lovely things about well, it's the only lovely thing about COVID, really. But when we had all that going on, there was a real positive kind of outpouring of thanks and gratitude to the NHS. And it's kind of gone off a little bit. And I think that's a real shame, because that made a real difference to the people working in the service. So we'll have it here in this hour, all to you. And I want to say, as I have said every week, I think, look after yourselves as well. That's really important, because you're really important as well. Now, today, oh no, it's not today. I think it's tomorrow. It's International Nurses Day. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, Chelone is giving me a nod, so I must be right. I always worry I get the day wrong, because I know the Midwives Day inside out, but not always so good on Nurses Day. So happy International Day to our nurse colleagues. It's also Maternal Mental Health Awareness Week. Lots of events going on, a lot on Twitter. And if you're not on Twitter yet, have a go at going on it. And if you're not on Twitter, try Facebook. Because there's a lot of materials and a lot of sort of discussion going on, which can be really helpful and interesting. You can also check out the Baby Buddy, a Best Beginnings app, because that's got a lot of material available too. And also the Royal College of Midwives iLearn platform has got a really good learning module on mental health awareness, and that can be helpful. And there's a new one for me, I didn't know about this, the motherhood group. So have a look at that, put that in your Google and find out about it, because that's got a lot of information that can be helpful in your practice. Now, I wanted to share two papers with me. I printed them out, so I'm going to read them at leisure. I've read the edited highlights. I knew about one of them, certainly. And one of them is that they're both from the British Association of Perinatal Medicine, BAPM for short. One is a sudden and unexpected postnatal collapse, and that's a framework for reducing risk, investigation and management. And this has just come out hot off the press, both of them hot off the press. And this is for safe skin to skin care. And I know a lot of our viewers are very much into skin to skin care, and it's a really important part of the relationship building and the whole process of birth and childbirth. And this ensures that we can make sure that women and their babies are as safe as possible. So it's worth having a read of that. The other one is lactation and loss, which is it sounds very heavy, but this is management of lactation following the death of a baby. And again, we do need to know about this sort of materials. And this came out in March, but so it's fairly hot off the press. So that's got lots of guidance for us all in the care that we give mothers after the loss of a baby. So useful. Now, the other thing that's hot off the press is an RCM Scottish survey is reporting, surprise, that midwives are under huge stress. They're reporting staffing issues, lack of staff and missing meals and loo breaks, which is awful. So again, we need to make sure people know about this. We need to get a bit political, maybe with our MPs, to let them know how we feel about it and look after ourselves and our colleagues through this process. Of course, we also know about the continuing war in Ukraine, so that's still going on and awful. The news is very heavy. And now, of course, we've got the ongoing cost of living crisis, which is also really difficult to hear about and understand. And we need to look out for each other and look out for the women and the families we care for, because some of whom are going to be suffering with lack of food or lack of resources. And we need to know where to direct people to get some, if they need to go to a food bank, for example, or if they need additional support. So that's on our top list. And just to finish this bit of the news, a big congratulations to Professor Mary Renfrew. She's been elected as a fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences, and she's the first midwife to be so elected. And she, of course, had quite a lot to do with the Lancet series of midwifery and linking into that the NMC midwifery proficiency. So she's done a huge amount, and so it's richly deserved. So congratulations to Mary on that honour. Fantastic. Now we're going to skip back now to the main content of the evening, and we're going to be looking at careers. And I know I talked a little bit last week about my own little career pathway, and one of the things I always felt was it would have been really nice to have more direction right at the beginning, to have some ideas about where to go and how to go about it. And we're hoping over the next few weeks to do some career kind of spotlighting. And we're so pleased because we're going to look at, in fact, one of the comments I must make is one of the things I'm very aware of is a midwifery career opens up a huge range of possibilities, huge range. And it's quite dizzying, the amount of choices that you can have. So I'm going to have two of our guests who are going to help us look at the careers in different ways. And I'm so pleased to introduce, first of all, Michelle Steptoe, who's been a midwife for 29 years, so it must be good. She's still with us. And she's been in higher education for the past 14, achieving an MA in academic practice and senior fellowship of the Higher Education Authority in 2016. She's currently the course director for the 3-year midwifery degree at the London South Bank University, and she's had loads of roles, from evidence-based trust guidelines and standards ward coordinator positions, staff training and development, supporting and promoting home birth, and she's also a qualified hypnobirthing teacher. So she's very much involved in normality through empowering women and also supporting midwives to develop their skills in supporting women and person-centered care and developing knowledge. So welcome, Michelle, to this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Now the screen is very much yours.
Thanks, Sue.
Beautiful.
Okay. So career planning. So I was asked to look at career planning really from the perspective of pre-registration candidates, prospective students. But actually, if you're a qualified midwife and you're anywhere along the spectrum, I'll catch up to you. So don't worry, there'll be something here for everyone. And I just thought this picture really spoke to me, and I can't remember what the game is called, but it's one of those games of chance, right? And so career planning should not be left to chance. And that was the idea around this first picture. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand why. So the first question that, and I was discussing this last week actually with somebody, why a graduate midwifery program? And I'm sure a lot of students now who are going through their semester 2 assessments, and when we, interview candidates, maybe a lot of them are thinking, well, why do we have to study for a degree? Because midwifery is very skills based. And so what I did is I had a look at our new course specifications. And so obviously they're on the NMC standards, and they are made from the perspective, because this is our new curriculum. And at the end of the course, midwives need to be able to develop to act as leaders and change agents, and be aware of the significance of innovation, creativity, the best available evidence in evaluation and development of woman-centered care and maternity services. So we need to be able to promote collaborative working with our service users and all the people that we work with, interdisciplinary and multi-agency, to provide contemporary midwifery practice. And we need to develop midwives who recognise their own strengths through reflection and exercise responsibility for their own professional and career development. And so this session is really something that people need to think about really on coming into midwifery. Where would they like to be in so many years' time? And in order to meet those standards, the NMC standards, if we remember, so it's not just about the skills, but you will be responsible, in the RCN wrote, you will be responsible for the primary coordination of care, or of universal care for pregnant, labouring and postnatal women, providing support and guidance and appropriate referral. And I always say that the midwife is like the gatekeeper. And we've heard evidence, haven't we, from Ockenden, that if we don't use those gatekeeping skills appropriately for women who require additional care, then care is not going to be as it should be for those women. So every woman comes through our hands, but we need to be able to recognise when women need additional care. So it's not only about the day-to-day things that we do as a midwife, but it's about those excellent ongoing communication and problem-solving skills, especially, that are required to meet these NMC proficiencies from the day that we qualify as midwives. So, moving on then. So, if you go to the RCM iLearn, there is a resource called the Career Pathway, and actually, if you click into there and if you click on education, you actually see me and a little bit about myself and my career in there. So there's a little bit of a case study, but actually they have mapped out, if you like, the types of areas of where you can go in midwifery. And as Sue said, midwifery, it's not just about being a midwife. It opens so many different doors. And here I've kind of mapped out the areas that you can go with. Now, you would think that midwife would be at the beginning, but actually midwifery is central to all of these different careers that you see here. So we've got our clinical practice, we've got education, which I'm in, there's research, and then there's management. And just want to say that when I was looking for sort of these relevant pictures, I've got a colleague here who's pictured here with one of our students. And also this little group of midwives down here was it's actually where I did my training as a student. So these are all of the midwives that I actually worked with. So I just found that really amazing that I found that online. And of course, our chief midwifery officer that we can see here. So what pathway? And it's not that this pathway is linear. So it's not that you start off in practice and then you go, you move up to research, you move into management, and then potentially go into education. It's actually, there is no linear process here. It's about where your passion lies and what it is you feel you are being pulled to experience and to work in. So I want to start with clinical practice. Now, clinical practice will cover everything, really, from being a Band 5 midwife, so that's a newly qualified midwife, to being a consultant midwife. And I would say that you can only decide what is right for you right now. It's not about saying, well, so-and-so did X, Y, and Z, and this is what I should do, because you have your own families, you have your own responsibilities. Remember that when you come into midwifery, you're not this newly formed person. You are a person with skills and knowledge and transferable skills with whatever you've done. You may have been caring for children at home, you may have been caring for a parent, you may have been caring for a relative, you might have been out in the world of work, you might have studied another degree. So you are already a formed person when you come into midwifery. And the reason that you've come into midwifery is important, and you need to remember and hold on to that so that you can think, okay, what do I want to do now that I've qualified? And to try to set yourself some 3 and 5-year goals. I think it's important to set those goals, whether you reach them or not, but also to check in with those goals to see where you are. It's important to also explore other roles within midwifery. And what, and even if you don't think you want to be a particular specialist or whatever, it's always good to look at job descriptions and actually to view their person's specifications. Because what we do is we look at them and we measure ourselves against those personal specifications, and we say, yes, this means me. But actually, what you should be measuring yourself against is not only the essentials, but the desirables. And think to yourself, these are desirable, and these are the things I need to work beyond in order to really put myself ahead of the field. And not only are you thinking about what job that you might do, so look on NHS jobs and think about all the different fields that you might go into, all the different specialities. So think about where you've come in. You might think about teenage pregnancy, you might think about safeguarding, so supporting women who have complex social needs and require additional care, midwifery care. What is your passion? What is it that drew you to midwifery in the first place? And what is it do you think that's going to keep you here as a midwife? Seek some secondment opportunities. So these are opportunities where you can still have your job as a midwife and still be paid as a midwife, but you're actually going to do another job that allows you to develop those desirable and additional skills that you might not have. And that will then go onto your CV and will again put you ahead of the crowd. Get involved in audit projects and guideline development. It's important that we can understand how research gets into practice and how our services are audited and the standards that we are measured against, so that when it comes to setting standards and developing guidelines, you are aware of the nuances and the discussions that happen that you might think happen beyond your level, but that's not what it is at all. And, you know, from the time that you qualify and as a student, you should be looking to see, okay, what's the audit, what evaluation projects are going on, and how does this guideline get into practice from research. And from an early start, I would encourage students to think about funding opportunities. So now when you have an elective placement, you can apply for awards, so you can write essays and get awards. And if you get yourself into that process of applying for things, then as you qualify as a midwife and as you seek to develop your own skills, you can then seek further funding opportunities so that you can develop those leadership opportunities. That you might want to take a course in perinatal mental health. You might want to seek out a safeguarding support role, and think about sort of women who have additional needs, so that you can broaden your horizons. Because there's nothing worse than qualifying and you become a midwife and then it's like, okay, what do I do now? And I will always say to people that before you know it, you'll have been qualified 5 years and the time will have gone, and you will think, well, gosh, what have I done? And if I can give you an example of sort of my what's happened with me is that I've done jobs and then I've broken and sort of thought about education. So whenever I've gotten myself a different role, even if it's been education, management, even the hypnobirthing course that I did, this was interspersed with developing a skill and thinking about, okay, what is the job that I want to do? What is the education that I need? So that before I've gone for a particular role, I know that I am going to fit the criteria on paper. How I present myself on the day is a different thing altogether. But at least I can meet those person and desirable qualifications. And so your band find midwife, I actually looked up some sort of desirable skills, some essential skills really for a band 5 midwife. A person spec for band 6. So team working, evidence of teaching, IT skills, budget awareness at band 6, understanding the role of research and development, ability to prioritise and demonstrate time management and organisational skills, advanced life support in obstetrics. So as a band 6 midwife, so we know that midwives move from band 5 to band 6 after their preceptorship period. But look what's required of you at band 6. And for consultant midwifery, evidence of research experience working in an academic institute, experience of public speaking, and published material. So if we think about all of the different roles that can occur between band 5 and consultant midwife, and there are many, myriad, it's like the sky's the limit, really. So if you want to move from clinical practice to education, now for me, that was a really big step. And I sort of had my feet in both camps for a very long time. So I was a clinical practice facilitator or a lecturer in practice. And I was employed by the Higher Education Institute and by the Trust. And it was a great role because you kept your clinical skills and you did some teaching and marking and gained those skills. But actually, if you want to take that final leap into education, then start off small and start off early. So we know that in midwifery, teaching is synonymous. And actually, I didn't even realize I wanted to go into education as a midwife. But what I did was enjoyed doing parent education. And so I dipped my toe in teaching in that way. And when you start to get positive feedback, you can then think, okay, well, maybe this is something that I can do. Plan your professional development opportunities and develop your teaching skills. So not only are you teaching the women that you're looking after, but you're also thinking about the students that are coming through your trust, because we know that part of that is supporting students. So consider your own learning experiences as students. Think about what helped you or what helps you, and then think about how you can support a student to develop. Get involved in research projects. You're going to hear that a lot from me in this 15 minutes. Research is the basis of all we do. And if we don't really get involved in research, reading research and being able to critique research, then we can't be in conversations with our consultant colleagues, and I mean midwifery consultant colleagues, our lead midwives, and our obstetric colleagues. We can't be in the same conversation with them if we don't actually understand what research is and how it impacts on our practice. And again, at this point, you need to be seeking funding for your development opportunities. And that is, from an education perspective, thinking about PhD as not a newly qualified midwife, because part of the PhD process is that you've practiced for a few years, but not a lot of years. So you can get funding for PhD projects. You can get Mary Seacole Awards, and you can go to the Iolanthe Trust. These are a few places where you can apply for funding. Funding is not something that is your right. You will get sort of mandatory training within the trust, but if you're going to try to get yourself to a master's degree and then get yourself to a PhD, then you have to look for some support for that. And so planning early is the advice that I would give you for that. So if you want to think about research now, I think if I said this to my current students, they'd all groan and go, oh no, not research. But actually, there are some people who, for them, research is really exciting. And I also consider you know, if you're the type of person that has a particular, you know, you like things in a certain way, you're very ordered, you're very process driven, then definitely research is for you. And consider at least trialing a research post. Again, I looked on NHS Jobs website, and there were research, midwifery research jobs going. And as part of that, you need to have knowledge of good clinical practice guidelines. You need to know about the research governance framework, and the medicines for, I'm sorry, but these little things on the side are interfering with a few of my presentations. So excuse me if I don't read the words on the end, but I'm sure you can see them. So you need to know about research and ethics, and you know, how to treat clients when they may well be involved in your research projects. So again, this is about forward thinking. This is about saying, if I'm going to have a career in research, I will need to get a course in clinical practice, good clinical practice, and understand the governance framework. So again, that you're ready to take up a position when you are ready to take up a position. It's nothing worse than going for an interview and someone saying, yeah, but you're not, you didn't meet this criteria. Find this out and think about these for yourselves. But also from a basic point of view is that you also need to have good IT skills and to have knowledge of office packages. Now, we think today we're all sort of IT savvy. Here we are on Zoom. But I know when it becomes time for students to submit work over, you know, on Moodle, for instance, that's when it all sort of cracks up, and, you know, IT skills are not as honed as they should be, and office skills, MS Word and things like that, are not as honed as they should be. So if you need to, take a course, take a preparatory course in IT skills, so that again, you can work a spreadsheet and you can you know, produce documents that look like quality. And again, seek funding opportunities. There are PhD, paid PhD or stipend PhD opportunities available for midwifery, nursing and midwifery, and these are in the National Institute of Healthcare Research, and you can study a PhD full-time. I had a student actually who qualified, came into midwifery quite late, and as soon as they qualified, actually got funded for a PhD and is now, you know, PhD doctor. So it's really fulfilling if that's what you want to do. Think about it earlier in your career. And then once you know, have got sort of research under your belt, you can actually branch out into other areas. So you don't necessarily need to stay within midwifery. You can go into other areas of the NHS and bring your knowledge and skills that you've learned back to midwifery to improve care and outcomes for women, because that's ultimately what being a midwifery researcher is about. And then, so carrying on really from clinical practice, when you get to your band 7 or your band 8 and you're a lead midwife, you might want to then go into management. So from your lead midwife, you can go all the way up to being your director of midwifery, or your, you know, your lead midwife, not lead midwife, your head of midwifery, head of, you know, and you can go all the way. So, and something Sue was saying earlier, and I thought that was quite relevant, is that you have to have political awareness, because you have to understand what the pressures are on maternity and on the staff. You have to be a transformational leader, and that's something that the RCM really put at the centre of their careers ladder, is that leadership from band 5 to director of midwifery is required at all levels, and we need to be able to be leaders. And I think probably my time might be running out. So you need to have highly developed skills, and in advancing midwifery practice and having evidence-based. So I've got some take-home messages, so some a bit of repetition, but that's because I want you to remember these really important aspects of career planning. So use the skills developed during your graduate midwifery program. We teach them because the NMC asks us to produce midwives with these basic proficiencies, which will help you to improve the care for women. Your ongoing development is in your hands. Plan your master's degree early in your career, and then you can start thinking about your PhD. Set yourself time-oriented goals and review these frequently. Know the desirable qualities for the role that you want so that you can outskill your competitors. Take advantages of experiences that will help to develop the required additional knowledge and skills that you're going to need. Funding is not automatic. So you're not going to be paid by your trust to get all of your education. So you need to plan this into your goal setting and get involved in audit and research, because these skills will be required at all levels of midwifery. I've added some resources here for you to use and to find additional information. I also embedded some of the job specifications here just for you to look at. So band 5, consultant midwife, and there's a director of midwifery going if anybody's interested. And yeah, some useful links for the Darcy Fellowship that's run at LSBU. And that is me. And just remember, the world needs midwives now more than ever. So that's you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was lovely. And I love the passion, the focus on the passion, quite a bit on planning and a lot on funding and a lot on CPD and PhD. So it's a really good take-home message for us all to think about. So thank you so much for giving us our foundation. I'm going to move very rapidly on to Chelone now, because we are, you know, tight for time as ever we are, because an hour goes far too quickly. So I'm really so delighted to introduce Chelone Lee-Wo. She qualified as a registered nurse in 1994. She's worked in gynae and orthopedic surgical wards at Kingston. She's gained a BSc honours of midwifery and a diploma in obstetric ultrasound from King's College. And as a midwife in Northwest London region, she set up a multidisciplinary teenage pregnancy community-based service, which continues now. She was a supervisor of midwives until that ceased, and she had 2 years in Trinidad as a case-loading midwife in the only Caribbean standalone birth centre, where she completed her MSc in advanced midwifery practice and produced a free red book equivalent for the local parents. Fantastic. And she started as a consultant midwife in St George's in 2017 and focuses on public health, maternity transformation and patient experiences. So welcome, Chelone, and the screen is now yours.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you very much, Sue. So Michelle has given a really great introduction for my talk as well, because I'm not very good at career planning. So thanks very much, Michelle. And I've been asked to talk about my journey to become a consultant midwife. This is a journey that was fought with ifs and buts all along the way. And really everything Michelle said, you'll bring it into to my talk a bit here. And so these are the first few messages that I have for you before I sort of just give you a little bit of how I got to where I'm going to be. One of the first things is keep studying and reading. So don't stop reading. When you're exhausted at night, you come home from work, just have something there to look at. Sue actually provides us with a lot to look at, so that's great. Updating midwifery is not difficult now because there's so much to access, but it does take commitment. It takes that little extra 10-15 minutes that we could just, switch on something else to keep up with it. The next thing is stay focused, learn from everything you do, absolutely everything and everyone you work with, whether it's the HCA, the director of midwifery says something to you, everybody you work with, you can learn something from, okay? And learn more from your difficult situation. So rather than come out thinking, that's it, I'm fed up, I'm not going to be a midwife anymore, we need to take out of it. It's not an easy occupation, midwifery. It's a very challenging occupation, but we have to love what we do. Okay, and that's why most of us are in midwifery or still in midwifery, is we love what we do. And maternity services needs you. Maternity needs compassionate and dedicated workers. The last thing is enjoy your life outside of work. Probably should have put this first, but definitely you must think, Michelle again spoke about this, your plans don't have to, your plans for your career aren't interrupted by your life. Life is all about your family, your friends, what you enjoy, what makes you happy. Your family and friends will be at your side when the job gets tough, so keep them. If you feel you need to work part-time for a little bit to catch up with things in your personal life, do. It will not impact your career. I worked 17 years part-time while I had children, because I love children so much. I've fostered 21 in those years as well. And so they keep me a bit busy. But the whole time, I never really stopped studying or moving on or developing the service that I was in. So the next thing is you can take a different path to become a consultant midwife, but you need to demonstrate passion for what you do. The different pathways were really laid out by Michelle in a different way. And so some of what I'm saying, it doesn't contradict what Michelle said, but what I would say is that her infographic with the midwife in the middle was beautiful. And we have 4 pillars to being a consultant midwife. There are sort of 4 pillars that we look at, and in the job descriptions, you'll normally see these 4 pillars, and then there'll be, what we expect for each one. And there'll be clinical practice, obviously, education, research, and management. So you'll have those 4 areas of clinical practice. And so I'm going to talk, I'm not going to, you can leave the slide there, but I'm not going to talk at the slide at the moment. So these 4 areas are the areas that Michelle alluded to, and you can dip in and out of these in your career. Okay, so if you want to become a consultant midwife, you don't have to go through one area. You don't have to stay in clinical practice to become a consultant midwife. Okay, you can change, you can do different things. You can go into midwifery sonography. I did that. I became a sonographer for 4 years. You can become a matron, go into management, operational issues. And that doesn't mean that you have to stay on the operational pathway. So you can mix and match. You can go into practice development for a bit and into research for a bit and come back and forth. And lots of midwives at the moment have 2 jobs, have dual roles, where they might do 2 days a week in the research side, 2 days in education, or 2 days in clinical practice. And I think that's fantastic, because really in 1996, when I started midwifery, or when I qualified, we didn't really have those options. Didn't really seem as acceptable to sort of have 2 roles. So going back to myself, so what did I do? How did I get here? Again, it wasn't terribly planned. In 1991, I came to the UK. I didn't grow up here. I came from a little tiny island, Trinidad and Tobago, and I came here to study midwifery because there wasn't such a thing as a midwifery qualification in the Caribbean yet. And so I came here to do a degree. In that year, we weren't. I didn't have a degree actually to join, so I did the registered nursing qualification first, and also because I realized, which is a little important point for midwives who may return to, I'll say 3rd world countries, but they're not all 3rd world countries, to other countries. Some of the countries that we come from still require that we are a registered nurse to have a midwifery job. And so for me, it was really important, because then in 2013, I did go back and work as a midwife for a bit. So that's something to think about if you are dual nationality, or if you want to work maybe all around the world and you're not sure what you want to do, and you've not come into nursing, and you might be in school or in college at the moment, is to think about whether you should do nursing and midwifery. So I didn't stay in nursing very long, partly because of my health, partly because I just loved gynae nursing, and I thought I need to work with women. What can I do? And again, in those days, I talk like it sounds like I'm talking about the 1800s, but anyway, call the midwife days. But even only it's only 25, 26 years ago. But in those days, I was told that I really shouldn't enter midwifery without being a nurse for at least 5 years. And so these are the battles that we had at the beginning, which a lot of you who are qualified midwives came from the direct entry system don't realize that we did have quite a fight when we came into midwifery. And so I was the first of the Project 2000, which was the diploma course at Kingston and Epsom College of Midwifery in 1994, to start there. And the course wasn't taken too well in the wards. It was seen that we weren't going to have enough hands-on. And so it was an interesting sort of battle, but for me, it was all exciting. So it didn't really matter. And I wasn't very politically aware at the time. But then as I went on, as I became a qualified midwife, and I realized that the midwives who came in directly, and I was quite envious of them. I thought, oh, that's amazing. They've come straight into midwifery, and that they weren't welcomed on the wards in the early days. So that was a shame. But I think now we've moved on from that, and we're seeing we're looking at associate nurses, MSW training, all sorts of different routes even into our profession. That's more exciting, really, the access to lots and lots of women. So then after qualifying, I did the mandatory mentorship, which is now your supervisor for students and for teaching. I did the examination of the newborn course several years later. That was when it was quite new for midwives, and that was quite exciting as well, because we were sort of trailblazing the whole examination of the newborn being taken over by midwives. And finally, as you know, it has been in most hospitals for the babies who are sort of a normal age and whatnot. And then in 1999, I went on maternity leave. I got a little bit bored in maternity leave. Oh, my child was lovely. But so I decided to do an ultrasound course. So I went to King's College and did the diploma in obs and gynae ultrasound. And I had done physics at A-levels, and I thought it was interesting. I wasn't very good at it, but I thought it was really interesting. And so I was able to use my physics again, but just the sound waves, which was great, nothing else. And so that was really exciting to learn something akin to midwifery, but not quite, because I'd always found it really interesting. I did this. I couldn't give up my midwifery, which was really interesting, because I think I thought I would. But I couldn't. And so I had this part-time midwifery, part-time ultrasound, sonography role in my trust at the time. And it was great for me, but it didn't really suit the ultrasound department. And so after about 4 years or so, I just went back to midwifery, solely midwifery. And I used my ultrasound on the delivery suite if I was in the middle of the night. Someone came in, I remember a lady came in and she didn't want to be monitored, and she had twins. So you can imagine that caused slight anxiety. But she was happy to have an ultrasound. So after about an hour, I just said, well, I can't scan you all night, love. You need to, if you're going to, I said, there's no point having an ultrasound. And I spoke about the waves and the, and the risks attached to ultrasound versus fetal monitoring. And then she was happy to be strapped up to the fetal monitor for a little bit. So it was interesting because I was able to use my ultrasound in the clinical area, and it meant that they didn't have to call the consultant. And then I also used it when I was working with women in the community. So then I moved into the community area, and it was really akin to what we now call continuity of carer. And it was the domino scheme, and then integrated midwifery. And so we did what you do in the continuity of care. We did every area. And what I also did was the women that I booked, I tried to do their dating and their anomaly scans. So that was really great continuity of care. They got their ultrasound from me as well. And I did ultrasound in the assessment unit. And I would do for my community colleagues, if they wanted presenting parts done or whatnot, I'd be able to do that. So that was a nice little addition. I keep up my knowledge in ultrasound, but I haven't kept up my clinical skills, so I wouldn't do an anomaly scan tomorrow, but I'd be able to read the anomaly scan. So that's, you know, that's something. Then I continued, and in 1998, this is parallel to doing my ultrasound interests. I started a teenage pregnancy group in the community, and this was a holistic type group with another midwife, and it was community based, but we did try to have everyone have contact with one of their midwives in the interpartum period. We concentrated on contraception, smoking cessation, drug advice, domestic violence, lots of asylum seekers. We were in West London near to Heathrow Airport, and so it really was quite a heavy area for asylum seekers and whatnot. And so I'd learned a lot. I learned an awful lot, and I learned a lot from my women. So the women taught me an awful lot and have taught me in my career. And what can teenagers teach you? Well, they can teach you a lot, actually. And one thing they did teach me is that a midwife can change your life. And I didn't really believe this at the beginning until these young women started to come back to us and tell us that they wanted to be midwives like us. They wanted to be a nurse. They wanted to do something like we did. And in the 16, 17 years of doing that, I think that we probably had about 6 to 8 of our pregnant teenagers become qualified midwives through the 3-year course. So I really realized from that although I loved midwifery-led care, that probably public health was going to be my great passion. So over the years then, I continued doing modules. I did modules that were interesting to me. I wanted to do a master's degree, but I didn't want to do anything that was not interesting. So I did the mental health and childbearing, leadership and development courses. I became a supervisor of midwives, and I did the research modules, then a dissertation on home birth. I became a breastfeeding counsellor, again, as a part-time job, as 1 day a week while being a midwife with the teenage pregnancy team in a health visiting clinic. So this was 1 day a week for 2 years. And that I learned a lot from the health visitors and from women. And you actually see the babies beyond 2 weeks, which was amazing, which was lovely. Going back to Trinidad in 2013, that was something that I really always wanted to do. I wasn't in a position to really go back and stay. But 2 years in a birth centre, I took a teenager with me and my husband, and it was fantastic. I mean, continuative care was 3 midwives, sometimes 2 midwives, actually 2 or 3 midwives running a birth centre on call 7 days a week for a week at a time. What was our pain relief? And it was a standalone birth centre, and the pain relief was a doula. So when a woman asks you, what pain relief do you offer? There's no Entonox in the country, no access to Entonox in the whole country. And if you want an epidural, you can have an epidural in the public system if you're going to have a cesarean section. So your pain relief was a doula. Hence, I work beautifully with doulas. I love doulas. And I think all MSWs should have doula training in the UK. So really to sort of, to sum up, I'll go through quickly if the next slide, what do I actually do at the moment? So I worked out a 5-year strategy. Something I love when I had to come for my interview as a consultant midwife to St. George's, is they asked me for my vision. I thought, my goodness, do I have a vision? And of course you have a vision. I had to, and I wrote down my vision, which I'd never written down my vision. And this is something that I think is a great thing to practice, is what do you think your vision is? And your vision is not your short-term plan. It's not that plan for maybe 2 or 3 years, what you're going to do next. It's going to be what do you think you might want for women, for everyone around you, for society, for midwifery. What's your vision? And so I wrote down my vision. I presented my vision, and I thought, well, if they don't like it, that's fine. I'll go somewhere else. And I got the job, so that was good. And so this is sort of what my vision is summarized here. Is to bring everything together for women, to make sure their experience is top notch, is a positive childbirth experience. And, you know, we put all these things together and we improve their outcomes. They're happy, they're healthy, they have positive experiences. Next slide, please. Thank you. And these are sort of my priorities. If you want to know, what do I do? What does she do? Public health midwife. What does that mean? And these are sort of the priorities in the public health field at the moment. Smoking cessation, infant feeding. So we've got baby friendly initiative, maternal screening, vaccinations, obesity, And that's a real passion of mine, is obesity and putting well-being and plans in place for women. Also I do lots of out of guidance plans for women who are obese to go in the birth centre, and they do really, really well. But I work with these women earlier on in pregnancy to put in a well-being plan first. Mental health weaning, postpartum contraception. I'm currently learning a new skill, which I'm really excited about that, to put in implants. And that the idea is to offer that to women on the postnatal ward. Hypnobirthing, continuative carer, and childbirth experience. So one of my really great things is experience. And so I worked with the MVP, the Maternity Voices Partnership, and part of the patient partnership group in the hospital. And so that's, for me, is really important, that experiences are positive, and every experience can be positive. I remember as a band 6 midwife in the community when a woman had lost her baby, and I'd done the community, the postnatal care. And at the end of it, she gave me a gift, and I thought, you can't give me a gift. And she said, I thank you so much. We had a wonderful experience. And I just sobbed. I sobbed because she'd lost her baby, and she felt so well looked after. That this really is the essence of midwifery, is that we need to love what we need to do. We need to love the woman. And so whatever role or whatever path you take in midwifery, just love what you do. I can be a little bit touchy-feely. So if you have any other information, you can scroll on in the end. Lovely, thank you. These are the other consultant midwives. We have 3 consultant midwives in St. George's. And so there's one for complex pregnancies, and these are the areas that they tackle. Next slide. And the next one is midwifery-led care. So that's probably the consultant midwife that you would have thought, this is what we have consultant midwife for. And these are her main areas of priorities at the moment. Next slide. These are my objectives. So these were just putting a little bit more detail on what I do. I also co-chair transformation in maternity with an obstetrician. That was my suggestion, because the job role came out for the Southwest London area only 9 months after I joined the trust. So I thought, well, I haven't really been there that long. So I suggested a co-chairing with someone from a different part of the multidisciplinary team, which has really been beneficial for us, a midwife and obstetrician. Hopefully that will continue. And the other role that I co-chair in is the Disability Staff Network, and that's something else that you can do in your areas of work. Is don't just stick to your clinical field, is look what else is happening in the hospital. So you've got lots of staff networks, and get involved with them, because that keeps your workplace more enjoyable, is to do other things for your staff as well, for your colleagues. Next slide. Lovely. And next slide. These are just all the details. And basically, this is how the 3 consultant midwives in our unit. We're a tertiary unit, so it's a bit more complicated with our with the women we have, and the cases are quite complicated. But at the end of the day, we want everyone to have a positive birth experience and improve outcomes. And last slide. So these are measurable outcomes. How do we know that we do better? Because we can measure outcomes. We can even measure experience. And we have 15 steps, the Maternity Voices Partnership, that we should be all working with really carefully. And the final slide is just the details. So if you have any other questions for me, you can please feel free to contact me and email me. Thank you, Sue.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I think I've been very mean to everybody, because I've given you a very restricted time, and what's coming over to me very strongly is the passion, and you've used the word love and passion, and you want to do something that you want to do something you're interested in. I think that's really important message to give the audience. And actually what's interesting is people who watched last week will remember I had a patchwork, Michelle's had a patchwork, and Chelone's had a patchwork. So patchwork has got a sort of underlying message, and I think it's the kind of spreading out and the kind of dynamism that makes midwives. So thank you very much for that. Now we are running over a little bit, but we do have a little time for questions, because I know we've got a very lively little audience. So we'll try and answer most of the questions, and if we can't, we'll do it online if we can do that. And so we've had, sorry, excuse me. Well, I have Anika who says, how long would you say, and I'm looking over so everybody knows to my other screen for the question, so I'm not going somewhere else. Anika says, how long would you say is needed to be a lead midwife before you move on to director of midwifery? Now, this is good. How long to develop those skills outlined, or is it dependent on yourself? Crikey, that's like asking how long is a piece of string, but I'm sure Michelle can answer that easily.
Yeah, I really think it depends on yourself. And I think it depends on those transferable skills that you bring into the start of your midwifery career. Because as I said, not everybody comes straight from school. So, there are people who've done degrees, there are people who've been company managers, people who have even been doctors want to come and be midwives. So, and those people have already a set of skills and leadership that they can then transfer and then move very quickly. So the 3 to 5 years, I would say by the time you've been in a midwife for 5 years, you could be a lead midwife. Definitely 5 years. And I remember saying to a colleague of mine, because she told me, I was a band 7 by the time I'd been qualified for X amount of time. I said, right, I'm going to beat that record. So I felt that was a challenge. And I think by the time I was qualified for 4 years, I was a band 7. So I was, leading and coordinating. So it is possible.
And it's, I guess also, I think it has to be said that not everybody wants to go to those positions.
No.
And you have to be, and that's what it comes down to, your own planning, your own individual, what you want to do and where you want to go. And I think Chelone was talking very much about looking widely and this idea of doing lots of different things to keep your interest, not just in your own role, but actually supporting your colleagues. And I like that aspect, Chelone, that you were talking about. That made me feel, well, you could do all sorts of things all at the same time, which again, you were talking about the olden days. That we all remember that you were expected to set off, and it's so much more exciting now that you can try different things. I don't know, I've probably finished that one. I mean, a question that's kind of related to Annika's question, or Anika's question, is from Joe Degustin, who says, excellent presentations, of course. Wouldn't it be good to see some midwives progress to being trust CEOs? I wonder if there are any. Do you know of any?
No.
So we do have chief nurses in London who have been midwives, definitely. And of course you have nurses that are CEOs. So you've got people with nursing background. So there's no limit really to what you can, apply for. In my previous trust, my director of midwifery was the clinical director. I think she was the first non-obstetric clinical director. And that was probably about maybe 10 years ago. So, you can apply for anything. And so the role that I went for as maternity transformation co-chair, that actually went up only to consultant obstetricians at first in my trust.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I asked why. And so then they took it out to the band 8 midwives, the matrons, and direct everyone. And then I ended up proposing to an obstetrician, and she and asked her if she'd like to be my partner in crime. So you see, so then basically the ceiling is your limit. Don't give yourself limits.
Exactly.
So things
innovative, break the barriers, right?
I'm taking out the breaking the barriers, the ceiling, and I'm taking out the political bit and being assertive, and maybe believing in yourself a little bit. Maybe that's it. Not getting stuck anywhere. Okay, we've got Sharon Elder. Hi, Sharon, says, thank you, Michelle. Where do you see the advanced clinical practice in midwifery? Now, that's a big question, but I'm sure Michelle and Chelone could answer that. We'll start with Michelle.
I think it sits within sort of your lead midwife. And when I say lead midwife, I don't mean sort of a lead midwife manager. I mean, getting to the point where, you are able to have this overview of, midwifery and be able to support and improve outcomes. So your advanced clinical practice comes there, but it's not, again, it's not a linear thing. It's not a time thing. It's not that you have to serve your time before you can do that, because you may want to specialize very early on in your career and then do a course in advanced clinical practice. And I'm sure, Chelone, that advanced clinical practice will come under sort of consultant midwifery as well. So I'm sure there are some consultant midwives who also have advanced clinical practice, under their belt as well.
Definitely. So that's the route I took, advanced clinical practice. But my part-time, the modules that I did, I put them all together, and they really were more sort of public health modules. Everyone does a leadership and development module. You do your research modules and whatnot. So you do the similar ones, but the other ones I chose: mental health and childbearing, supervisory midwives, the examination of the newborn. They were all towards this public health sort of focus. And although I did want to work in a birth centre, it's you basically can't go wrong if you work towards an advanced midwifery practice qualification. It will take you into any area.
Definitely.
So.
Great, that's smashing. Thank you. Now, Fra, I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, says thank you for the presentations, and she's asking about the slides. I just need to reinforce to the audience that you will get a copy of the slides, like a PDF thing, as well as the presentations. If you've registered, you get the whole lot. So you can look at the references, because both Michelle and Chelone have included some really useful resources in their presentation. And Joe D'Augustin says, so inspiring. And this is for, I think, Chelone as well, or for Chelone actually. Thank you for sharing that with us about your pathway and your passion towards caring for women and families. Wonderful vision and nicely in line with better birth. So that's lovely. Thank you, Joe. That's good feedback. And then Claire Dale says, oh, this is going to be a difficult one. Thank you, Claire, for this one. How difficult is it to continue in education, MSc, when you still have a need to work full time? Are trusts quite accommodating in these circumstances? Good question. Claire always asks good question. What do you think? We'll ask for Chelone first, because
well, that is what I did. In actual, I probably wasn't always working full time during that, but I was working full time because I had children, so that it was a very busy life. But yeah, I suppose it does depend on your trust. I can't say hand on heart that every trust is going to be supportive. I see Michelle's nodding. Most of my modules were funded, and so that was quite lucky. I think for me, I felt that loyalty to a trust helps. So I think if you're moving around a lot, it might be quite difficult to get different modules funded. And sometimes they come with a little caveat. If you're going to have a module funded, you might need to stay with us for a year or two, or you pay for it afterwards. I'm not quite sure. I've heard of that and seen it. I've not had to do it myself, but I've seen that come out. I'm not quite sure how it works out, but or if it does motivate staff to stay. But yes, it is a bit of it's a little bit of a hit or miss, but it might be something really interesting for you to ask at interviews. And remember that at the moment we're desperate for midwives. Everybody wants midwives, so you sit in the driver's seat at an interview and see what you can get. I would say that.
Yes, love that. Michelle, you were nodding away.
Yes, because I'm not in a trust, so that's a difficult question for me to answer. But that's why I was really talking about think about your funding right from the beginning. So if you're not going to get trust funding, that shouldn't stall your career. So you should try to look at, well, where can I get funding from? Where is something available? And you might have to write, a presentation. You might have to give a public, speak in public. You might have to write an essay. But if that's going to help you get funding for where you're going to be, then go for it. The sky's the limit. And the person that, you're only limited by yourself.
Absolutely. Right? I think that's a lovely way to finish, actually. I'd love to listen to both of you for ages. And just on that point of the last question, I think sometimes it's a question of thinking about what the trust or the maternity service need or the education institution want. Because if you know they want something and you could achieve it by studying something and doing a project, you know, you can sell it that way. But anyway, I could listen to you both for ages, and I think thank you on behalf of our audience to both of you for your time and your lovely presentations, which I know that people are going to listen to again because there's so much there. And what I loved is the dynamism of both of you and the way you've made it so clear you can move around wherever to get where you're wanting to go, because you have to find out where you want to go. The passion, planning is a huge part of this. Funding, well, Michelle's the funding queen here, I think, and loving what you do. And I think that's so important. And thank you for giving us that steer and not to forget that bit of the love. So thank you very much. Now I'm just going to finish off now because we have to go till next week anyway. And I'm going to say thank you to the audience. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Fabulous as ever. And also just to reinforce that the resources that will be available on the website and on Facebook on Friday. And don't forget, next week we've got Why is there still a problem with bullying in midwifery? And we have the lovely Amanda Burley with us. And we're also going to have And My Uterus, a reflection on Roe versus Wade. You all know what's happening in the US at the moment. And we've got the lovely Laura Godfrey Isaacs with us next week as well. So it'll be a really interesting week, as always. Now look out for the personalised maternity care conference coming up, building on Ockenden. It's got some fabulous speakers, added to which this week, as well as Baroness Cumberledge and Dr. Claire Feely and Anna Madeley. We're going to have Sinitra Sharma and Banish Nazmeen. It's been Banish, sorry Banish, if you're listening, and Chris Binney. So we're adding to it all sorts of delicious things. Remember, we've got Manchester on the 21st of June, so register for that. We've got Wales and the Southwest 13th of September. We'll be here next week. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well, and look after yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.